Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn, our webinar series. We're kicking off. We'll give it another minute or two here just to have any stragglers join, so just hold tight for a second. All right, we will get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Rachel Petropoulos with CIFT, and I'm excited to share today's session that we've titled Navigating Workforce Changes, Preparing for the Knowledge Gap. And we know that this is an issue manufacturers are dealing with, especially as retirements and turnover and onboarding challenges stack up. And we'll keep it hopefully this practical and focused with a few examples from the field. And I'll be joined today by a couple of my colleagues who will share some insights on how companies are addressing knowledge loss through things like continuous maintenance and enhanced SOPs, giving you a little teaser there. For those who are new to CIFT, just remind you who we are. We are dedicated to helping Ohio manufacturers and food processors scale up and compete through innovative solutions. And you may not know either, too, that we are part of the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Network. We serve the 18 counties in the Northwest region of Ohio, but we are joined by 6 total centers across the state. We have a special outreach and technical support for food processors across the whole state. And also, you may not know of the solutions and guidance we give to small businesses and entrepreneurs here in Northwest Ohio. We have roots deep in agribusiness and a legacy of innovation. So just knowing there's a network behind CIFT, if you were not familiar with that. So getting started, knowledge is indeed walking out the door. And I use this picture as a little bit of humor, but also a reality. This was found in our break room here at CIFT when our longtime HR employee, Holly, left this spring. Holly also had knowledge of how to unstuck the garbage disposal. So it kind of shows that sometimes what's in your formal job description is hard to capture. And so here, Holly left us a job instruction sheet on how to do that and also cross-trained some of our employees. So again, a little bit of humor, but also we know that is what you all are facing too, is people leave with those troubleshooting tricks or the calibration tips, or they know that one machine and the workaround. So it's often undocumented and hard to replace. And we know too that this isn't a one-off problem, that it's a real tie to some of the labor market trends, that the number of job openings is just outpacing available workers. They say almost 8 million job openings this last winter with only 6.8 unemployed workers to fill them. So there's a real mismatch with the birth rates and also the what they call the silver tsunami, those retiring employees, just kind of that perfect storm right now. And we're just learning that when you hire somebody and train somebody up, it can take months or years for them to reach that. And that is what, it all leads to the talent scarcity. The pool of workers is small and there's fewer young workers going into those skilled trades. Turnover is high and job hopping is real. And there's just competition and you all know how you're all competing, again, for that same talent. But it isn't just a hiring issue, it's a knowledge issue. Those people are leaving, have so much undocumented expertise. And that is where we will call, it's resulting in the skills gap. There's that loss of tribal knowledge, and onboarding can really take long and be inconsistent with the newer force. And what that can lead to is the quality and safety and production that are at risk. And here in the food the food manufacturing realm, that can lead to some of the compliance demands that are on you. And that can really lead to some consequences. So again, this mismatch of the labor, the skill gap that results. What do we mean by knowledge transfer? And it really is that structured effort to capture, document, and share critical know-how. And it's not just about saving information, it's building continuity, reducing onboarding time, and avoiding costly mistakes. And if it's in someone's head, it is vulnerable, and knowledge transfer kind of helps build a system so you can retain it across your team. I don't think we'd call this lunch and learn unless we had a little bit of learning going on. And so this is a lot to take in, but I think it really kind of hits on where the gap is coming. That if you live in the bottom of the pyramid here where the data lives and the information lives, that is information management, but we really are hoping that you can move up into knowledge and wisdom. And that's where, you know, the longevity in the workforce, that's where they live and contribute to where you are having a strong workforce, a resilient workforce. And I like this scale on the side here, going from red to green, that those employees who have the longevity, that the decisions they're making on the floor, they are reducing your risk because of the knowledge and the wisdom that they have. And the reality is you're not just losing data, you are losing wisdom. And when I think too about some of the kind of those concepts with that pyramid of where that employee knowledge lives, that you don't want to be only reactive, you want to be able to anticipate with the decision-making skills that seasoned workforce has. That it's not just procedural, just not, you know, following what's in the binder, what's in the SOP, but you have to be able to adapt when things kind of go awry or something changes. And it's not just the explicit information that's written down, but that tacit, that stuff that's, you know, kind of the know-how that's hard to write down. It's unspoken, it's experience-based, and people gain it from a lifetime of a job. And also on the right-hand side, they're isolated versus shared. I think that does a great job showing that you have to be able to bring the whole team together to use the collectiveness of everybody's knowledge that they gain. So they don't want people to work in isolation. So again, just sort of some of what that pyramid is telling us of how to be, again, the resiliency that can be built in. But why is knowledge transfer so hard? And I think it's just everything is urgent. Everyone is busy. And SOPs maybe don't really capture what people really do. And that tribal knowledge of go ask so-and-so, you know, still rules. And turnover just makes consistency hard because you're always hoping, anticipating of that somebody will stay around. But as we said, you know, job hopping is real. And so just that disruption that comes. But thinking too, going back to the pyramid, that it is, you know, that base is nice and large, and we do need to build the base. And just kind of seeing here where some of that information lives, that the things that you all know and have available from SOPs, job sheet, work instructions, that hard physical data, the things coming off of the machines, the data that you work from every day, that lives down there. But hoping too that you keep moving up, you move up to that deep understanding, the troubleshooting, the problem solving. And I really like that one on keeping things organized, accessible, and retrievable, that is where knowledge is going to live if you can actually pull the data and give context to it. So there was a brief overview of just, yes, we know there's a problem. We know there are issues. There's a theoretical framework to move us up to knowledge management. But now, what does that look like now with what you have available and what we're learning from the field too of how knowledge management is, in practicality, if you don't have a deep enough training workforce or that turnover in the trainers you do have. So let's move on to maybe the reasons we're all sitting here now is let's hear some ideas of some of the strategies that are working or that we have at least starting to see come around. And the first up is going to be Jason. And Jason is my colleague here, and he is going to jump in and talk about autonomous maintenance. And I'm going to advance some slides for him. So thank you, Jason, for hopping on.
Awesome. Good morning to you all. So appreciate the introduction. So Jason Schinniger, fairly new here at CIFT. However, been in manufacturing for 20 years, primarily in operations, but continuous improvement as well. So one of the things that's near and dear to my heart when it comes to knowledge transfer, primarily was introduced with the workforce transition with folks. When I started, were there for 20, 30 years, ton of experience. That tribal knowledge really got us through onboarding the new folks and vetting out the folks that worked, folks that didn't work. But when that went by the wayside, we transitioned into what I'll call here is one of the 7 TPM pillars, autonomous maintenance, which I led for the plant. That was foundational in terms of building standards and working to keep machines running at an optimal condition. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So as it implies here, it is heavily maintenance related, but the overall goal is not to perform maintenance tasks. It's really to ensure that that piece of machinery is operating at a level where it's safe to operate. The output is at the quality that's expected, first and foremost. And then the other thing is to keep your minor stop. So any stop that is up to 10 minutes, down to at a reduced level to get it to 75% of a reduction and to maintain that so that the operator isn't continually interacting with that piece of machinery. So we'll go through that. So as you can advance the slide. So as you onboard a new operator, they don't understand really much of anything other than what they're told. I load this material into the machine, and out of the machine comes this part. And that's my job, right? And outside of that, I have any issues based upon my ability that I bring to the table, I may be able to address it. But more so, I'm going to raise my hand. I'm going to get some member of leadership. I'm going to get maintenance, some technical based solution. They're going to come and fix my problem. And that poses all kinds of problems, as we're all aware of. So the first thing that we do is, in terms of AM, is organize a very cross-functional team. Folks that obviously are deeply rooted in knowing that piece of equipment, and then folks that know nothing about that piece of equipment that bring that outside perspective. And step 0 is very foundational and grounding everybody what the goals are. So any historical data around that piece of equipment is gathered, safety, quality, and production-wise, maintenance-wise, and really baseline and understood. As I had stated, each step up to step 3 is to reduce the minor stops up to 75%. So 1 through 3 is 25% reduction in order to pass that step, which, you would think is pretty lofty. However, this is a very proven systematic approach that works. I haven't had one team over the course of 15 years leading this that it did not work, which gains a ton of buy-in to operators when they have to just sit back and monitor the machine rather than continually interact as it's going up and down. So the theory of operations is really the starting point in step 0 after all the baseline data is gathered. And what does that mean? That means, so some people, have a very high technical aptitude, some not, but what do we need to do to get everybody to the same playing field in the components of the machine? What is the role in producing the output that's desired, so that when there's issues, they have some understanding of how to troubleshoot. So, some folks don't understand what a photo eye is. Some folks do, but in a photo eye, typically how it's oriented is super important. So if it controls the conveyor stops. Well, if we don't have it set to where it's supposed to, then that's a place to go look. So just understanding, breaking the components down, going through that with engineering and maintenance folks, and starting to have those conversations. And those conversations are probably one of the most important things, because it brings up, when you have the subject matter experts and you have the new folks in there, it brings up a lot of things that are going to happen again, that folks become aware of. And then as you progress through the steps, the most important thing is, okay, it's happened. We anticipate it happening again. Here's some tools that we can do to prevent it from happening. And we'll get into that. So in step one, you got your baseline set, you set your team charter, you do some training around what we're going to do, and what the goals are. You're aligned, and it says, okay, so I got this piece of equipment. Typically, it's not something brand new. However, if it is, you start applying the standards. But if it's not, you restore it back to what we call a base condition, or I like to use more of an optimal state, because not everything needs to be OEM based. There's a lot of improvements that are made throughout the years. And that starts with cleaning. And it's not necessarily the cleaning task that you're looking to complete. It's the inspection while you're cleaning and the discussions around what you're finding. As we all know, over the years, fixes are made, some long-term, some short-term. And as you're uncovering those, you're documenting those. There's a pretty heavy base defect training that goes along with that. So the 8 types of defects, so folks get skilled up on what to look for while they're cleaning. You log those defects and you start prioritizing and attacking and fixing those, right? So the improvement in performance starts right in step 0. Obviously, as you're cleaning, you're inspecting, you're fixing defects, and you're starting to create standards, okay, and how you operate the piece of equipment. You analyze those standards in step 0. So like your PMs that you're performing, any startup checklists, any run rules, and on how you want to operate the piece of equipment. If it's multiple shifts and you're running it at a different speed across all 3 shifts, that's the master center line, and all the variables that come from that center line are impacting based on the speed. So you start having discussions and you start documenting what all those are and capturing those. In step 2, you're continuing to clean, you're continuing to find defects, you're fixing the defects, and you're really starting to get ahead of the defects that are found. The major defects, the safety and quality ones have been completely fixed, and then the major ones that are impacting performance outside of that are being addressed. There are things in place that are addressing those. You've already seen a 25% reduction in minor stops. So that starts to get a lot of buy-in to folks. So the folks that are on the team, obviously they're a big part of that. They see that. The folks that aren't on the team, they're also seeing it too, because it's running a lot better. It's looking a lot better, and the attention is in their area. So there's a lot of positive momentum from that. In step 2, as we're fixing things, we started to develop, I'll call it standard operating procedures, or I'll just call it standards in step 1. We're putting those standards out there so that folks can use those. So centerline checklist really start to get developed. Hard to reach places. So if we're asking folks to routinely perform tasks and it's hard for them to do, we're finding solutions where it's not hard for them to do. Either we're making modifications to the machine, we're giving them tools so that they can easier access the machine, those sorts of things. We've identified the major sources of contamination. So if it's a washdown area, it's going to get wet, but are there components on the machine that might not be rated at the IP69K rated, or are we covering those? What is being introduced to this machine that is causing it to deteriorate faster than its design life? Cardboard dust is another one. So we've identified those, we prioritized them, and the team is actively working on either how we eliminate them or we control them, because ideally, we got to be able to predict the life of each component to make sure it runs at its optimal state long term. So those skill sets in terms of troubleshooting, all that training comes along with it. And all this stuff is super important, because the investment in the employee is building that knowledge base and that skill set, so that long term, this process is, as you roll it out across your site, it doesn't matter if it's a case packer or, a filler, it's transferable and these same standards are applied. So it's very easy for that knowledge to transfer no matter where they're working. So more with those standards and that knowledge base is clean, inspect, lubrication. So ongoing, every shift, what is the routine inspections that need to be done? There's cleaning that needs to be done in order to maintain that piece of equipment. So you're controlling those sources of contamination. Any lubrication tasks that are simple. There's a whole lubrication program. So all this stuff is obvious at a glance for operators. So they know that, if I got to perform, these 6 checks, here's how they're coded and numbered. I grab my sheet. Here's the ranges they're supposed to be in. It's usually like a red-green sort of a thing with some arrows on it, and they can quickly dial it in. Now, that doesn't mean it's always going to run at an optimal state if you set it up that way, but anybody that walks by is going to be able to determine that, hey, you know what? Here's how it's set up today. It seems to be running good, the performance looks good, or it doesn't, but they know the starting point so that when we make adjustments or we ask for help or anything comes along, that we already know what's been done, and we're continually trying to get it back into centerline because we got things going on that's affecting our normal operating condition, right? So those questions continue to be asked. If we got to speed this up over here, well, maybe we got a bearing going out or something that's affecting that. So let's do some root cause analysis to try to figure that out before we have that failure, because we know we shouldn't have to do that sort of a thing. So I kind of like this where operators become human sensors. So when you're skilled and you know what's supposed to happen and you have the confidence in that, because that's the other thing I would continually see is, well, I don't want to touch it because I don't want to mess it up. Well, more than likely, you're not going to mess it up. And we want you to have the ability to make these changes, but that ability comes with the skill, and we got to provide folks with that.
All right, thank you, Jason, for taking us through that one strategy, autonomous maintenance. And moving on to another one that I know you're all familiar with, but just train the trainer and really utilizing that as one of our strategies for knowledge transfer for this generational changeover in workforce. And, a lot of skilled employees maybe aren't natural trainers, and that's okay. And this is where train the trainer can help unlock their ability. I'd like to, Jason just mentioned confidence, in be able to work on their machine, but also confidence in presenting the information, in being able to move into that mentorship. And maybe it is being able to offer a few tools to the trainer to build that confidence and to learn about the different learning styles that are out there that they will encounter. And definitely, again, build confidence. It supports that real world learning for faster onboarding and really turning their expertise into teachable, repeatable steps. And another strategy now that I am going to hand off, and really excited about this one because we are seeing some excitement around what we're calling enhanced SOPs. And, when it's done right, the SOP could really be a tool to help people learn faster and reduce rework and captures the real process on the floor. So Matt is going to now take over and share where he's diving into this space.
Yes, thanks, Rachel. Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Matt Integer. I'm an engineer here at CIFT. Excited to talk a little bit more about some of the tools that we use to significantly modify how we create SOPs for clients, how we provide access to SOPs for clients, and how the tools that we use to allow our clients to really utilize not only their legacy, but their real-time documentation and pull a lot of insights out of the data that these things are generating. So the first thing I want to discuss, I'm going to take over from Rachel here on the screen super quickly, is what we mean by enhanced SOPs in terms of how do we create them. And there's a lot of tools for creating SOPs. There's nothing wrong with opening up a Word document and writing down what you're doing, as long as you're clear, concise, and as we'll go over more and more in the course of this very brief presentation, you're creating opportunities for your people to be human sensors. That's an awesome one-liner from Jason that I had not heard until now and will absolutely be stealing because it does a really good job of very concisely talking about the importance of repeatability in manual operations and using manual operations to collect data that provides you insights. So let's take a look really quick at.
Matt, real quick, I think I might need to stop sharing. So
You can go ahead and leave that up, actually, Rachel. That'll work just fine. Let's really quick take a minute and look at one of the enhanced SOPs that we recently made for a client. Let me move my screen around, get all out of the way. Fantastic. So this looks a lot different than I think a lot of written SOPs you folks may have seen in the past. You can see that we've got short descriptions of activities. We've got images to go along with them so you can see what the activity is supposed to look like. We've got QR codes that provide links to web pages with even more information and video clips of one of our other engineers here completing a task. And this is a single page. It's short. It's easy to use. How did we generate this? We use a very specific AI tool. I mentioned before that generative AI can be really good at writing for you. One of the other things it's very good at is analyzing videos. And so one of our smart manufacturing software partners, we'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute, called Next Plus. They have a really interesting tool they call their Video Magic Maker that allows you, their entire tool is around SOP presentation and use, and we'll talk about that a lot more in a second. But they have this incredible tool that allows, instead of taking the time to sit down and write out step 1, do X, step 2, do Y, which is a huge reason why people don't have SOPs in the first place, is creating them is difficult. And you can just, when you can just attribute something to tribal knowledge, that's the easy way out, the path of least resistance, and people are going to take that most of the time. But what this allows you to do is film your best employee doing whatever manual operation you need to create an SOP for, and it'll take that video. You can see some of the user interface here as I go through this. It'll cut that video up into where the AI thinks important tasks are occurring. It will clip that video. So then you have specific, 5, 10, 25, 30-second sections of video of each task. It'll timestamp those, create a description, excuse the foreign language, create a description, and then export your SOP in a spreadsheet format that can be easily converted by the software into what we just took a look at, into our PDF. And so this allows you to substantially reduce the amount of time that you take documenting manual operations. And if you've used the substantial amount of time it takes as an excuse not to have written SOPs, this is a very, very good solution to that problem. This is one that we have access to. Like I said, we make these SOPs for our clients. This is, of course, a tool that you are all more than welcome to utilize from Next Plus as well if you'd like to do it yourself. But I'd highly recommend taking a look at this. If it's maybe this is the reason why you don't have as robust of an SOP environment as you'd like, is the time constraint. This is a really, really good way to get around that. So what do you do once you have SOPs? When you're ready to go, you've got work instructions for important manual operations. How do you display them to your workers, to your employees? Let's talk a little more about Next Plus more broadly, because it's not just an SOP generation tool. It's really, like I said, a smart manufacturing software designed around presenting SOPs and workflows in an easy to follow format to operators in any area, and then collecting important manual data that they're generating. Jason talked about employees and sensors. So let's look at the workflow section, and we can see how Next Plus displays SOPs to people. We'll scroll down here. It will look a lot like a flowchart, right? And that what this does is it minimizes decision-making processes that your people have to follow. That's the goal of any SOP, is we want to reduce decisions that employees have to make themselves and provide them with the right answer to whatever problem they're encountering. But by digitizing these documents, we can do really cool stuff, like, in this case, provide a ton of extra documentation, 3D models of parts, videos of other employees conducting the operation, images of important things to look out for. There's a lot of additional context we can add to SOPs when they're digitized and presented in a digital format. If you scroll down farther here, we can see, we talk about adaptive workflow paths. What if something goes out of, what if something's wrong? What if a pre-op checklist fails and we need to contact management? What if that happened automatically? What if we need to take a corrective action, but there's a list of corrective action that has to be taken? Instead of asking your employee to understand the situation and make the right call, we can ask them to record what they see, and our own digital workflows can point them to the right direction. Take this corrective action instead of that one. So the benefit of this is that you can limit the opportunity for variability and mistakes. and therefore hopefully reduce slowdowns or quality errors and things of that nature. This also allows you, like we said before, if your employees are working with digital versions of SOPs, it's easier to collect the data they're generating, right? Instead of writing down temperatures or throughputs or physical dimensions on a written spreadsheet, if you're collecting them digitally, that makes that data much easier to access and utilize later. And so you're taking a data entry step out of the process in terms of maximizing how you're using these manual operations. And so you can see down here what this looks like. Gotta move my cameras around. Essentially, this is what the UI looks like. It's available on any it's a web tool, so you can run it on a laptop, a tablet, a phone, and it presents these tasks to you in a linear fashion to your employees, and is a really good way to not have to sort through a 8-inch thick binder full of written SOPs. You can have SOPs assigned to you based on work orders, based on important operations that happen in a given day by your supervisor. Accountability is built in. Whatever employee accomplishes whatever task is linked to that employee, so you know who did what at what timestamp. All of this doesn't replace written SOPs; it just maximizes them. And so this is why we really recommend to a lot of our clients who have a lot of manual operations to utilize a tool like Next+. So the last thing we'll talk about super quickly here is what do we do if we have, let's say you're here because you've got legacy SOPs and they're just not where you want them. It'd be a lot of work to go back and fix them all. You've got years, decades maybe of written documentation. You're just not sure how to best utilize it. The answer to that can lie in another kind of interesting AI tool from one of our partners over at Delta Bravo. Data Mentor is a manufacturing-specific large language model, and it can do a lot of really interesting things. It can take legacy data you've created, live data that you poured into the system, and you can interact with that data in a dialogue format. That's the benefit of any sort of large language model, like our friends at ChatGPT or Google Gemini or anything of that nature. However, regarding SOPs, what this allows you to do is if you've got 20 years worth of SOPs that aren't very good and you'd like to modernize them or understand them better, those SOPs can be uploaded directly into this software, directly into this web tool, and interacted with in a dialogue format. So tell me why my packaging SOPs are creating slowdown in the department, or why high turnover is occurring in this area, if that's related at all to the operations these employees are doing. And boom, answer. I've got these 24 production SOPs. Do I need 24? How can I shrink them down to the least amount of number? There you go, an answer. I don't have an onboarding process for a forklift driver. Can you make one for me from the documentation I already have? Answer. So the ability to upload and characterize legacy information that could be scans of written information, old PDFs, Word documents, that makes this tool particularly powerful for another serious SOP problem we see, which is I've got a big backlog of them that don't help me at all. And so if that's maybe the category you fall in, this is a really, really great tool to kind of pull your way out of that. And this is another one that we use often. So if you have any questions about this or want to learn more, don't be afraid to reach out to me or Jason. We're happy to talk about Data Mentor or Next+ or any of the other tools that we utilize to kind of improve our clients' SOPs. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Matt. So you'll stop sharing and I can continue. Everybody, we have really jumped through, again, a few of these strategies and landed here on root cause analysis as another strategy when we think about this knowledge gap that is here. And, we know that many companies do have, problem solving, situations set up, but that root cause analysis is a really great place to make sure that the knowledge is actually going to last. And, we know that sometimes it's a Band-Aid or putting out a fire, but again, that really doesn't help with keeping things long-term in where the documentation of why. And think about that pyramid. There's all the data down below at the base, the what, but moving up the pyramid to the why. And sorry, guys. Really being problem solved into a shared organizational knowledge activity and builds that critical thinking beyond just fix it and move on. And again, the document lessons are learned so they're just not lost to when that turnover happens. So again, just a few strategies here of where we see that knowledge transfer, the gap that is there, that some things you may know about, maybe some things that we're new to here as strategies for knowledge gap, and a few other ones here just that we know can lead to some practical jumping off points for your knowledge management strategy. And that is where we were going to end today. And we will have some time now for you to put any Q&A in the box there, but also want to just end with, knowledge transfer isn't just about preserving the past, it's about preparing your team for the future. And resiliency is really that word that I love to come back to around knowledge transfer. And real quick, know that we do have another webinar coming up in July on kosher certification. Want to remind you all that. And a big thank you for spending some time today with us around this topic. So with that, I am going to stop sharing and see if we have any Q&A coming in. Jason, I know one thing that had come up is, were there any, say, friction, but anything coming up between the maintenance tech and the floor operators? Anything kind of historically that you encountered with some of that, the relationship starting?
Yeah, no. And to your point, especially with the transition with more new operators, the maintenance folks who get pretty frustrated over, maintenance line calls that they perceived were more the responsibility of the operator, whether it was setup or minor adjustments or those sorts of things. So this autonomous maintenance program really helped with that that knowledge base, so that it would really have to be from a maintenance perspective more warranted for that technician to be called over. Yeah. Good question.
Anybody else here? Well, everybody, I am going to say a big thank you for joining us today, and again, broaching this topic that we know is real, and that we know that there are some small steps that can make a difference in your knowledge transfer in this management of the workforce changes that are here, and that you're not alone, that CIFT and your peers are working on some solutions, and we hope that there was definitely some learning today, and we thank you, and until the next time, we'll be in touch.
Hey, Rachel, you have a question? You have another question, please? Could we have some case examples? Some case examples from Mark Zeller.
Hey, Mark. So I'll take this one. I think that would be reviewing some different case studies is going to require some talks with our clients. I'm happy to connect with you offline. I'll shoot you an email after this, and we can set up time to talk over some in-depth examples of what we've done.
Hey, everybody, I thank you again, and we will sign off.